Former Liberal leader Kerry Chikarovski and former Labor advisor and founder of Hawker Britain, Bruce Hawker. Great to see you both as always. Kerry, the news poll still has Dominic Perrottet and the coalition behind. Some improvement. Does it give them hope?
Well, I think I'm happier that we're in that position and not the other way around. It would have been pretty disappointing if the poll came out this morning and the coalition had dropped back. I think we've always said that it would tighten getting closer to the election, and that's what's happening. I think the interesting thing from the Premier is that his own personal approval ratings are increasing. Chris Minns is still in positive territory, which is a good thing for an opposition leader, but he's slipped back a little bit. I think the most disconcerting thing about the poll for the Premier and for the coalition will be that there seems to be a significant number of people who are suggesting that it's probably just time to change the government just because it's time to change the government. There doesn't seem to be a huge level of anger against, the Premier. There doesn't seem to be a huge level of anger against his government. But some people are just saying, the old it's time factor. So that's what they will be, I'm sure the coalition will be focusing on that for the next few weeks, explaining why it's not time to change the government.
It's a hard sort of force or momentum to push against when that perception is there, particularly when going for a more than a decade, Bruce Hawker, as you know very well. But when you look at those numbers today, what jumps out at me is that this is not a government that would be, you'd say, toxic, certainly not as negative as some of the ratings that Scott Morrison faced ahead of last year's federal election.
Oh, that's right. Perrottet's not in the same position as Morrison, where the electorate had basically given up on Morrison. I think there's a lot to be said about Perrottet and his premiership and his time as Treasurer, and I think we will probably hear a lot more about that as we go forward. The things I think which are most dangerous and damaging for the government are the division which exists within its ranks, which happens to all long-term governments, unfortunately. The discipline that they had when they came into office slowly dissipates, and after a decade, it is very easy to make the case for a change of government. One of the most devastating things you can say to Liberal voters, if you're the Labor Party, is look, why don't you just give your party a rest in the paddock for about 3 years, see how they go after that, give them a chance to get their act together, and that does what we all call giving permission to voters to change their vote. And psychologically, that's a very important thing. So, look, I think, as Kerry is clearly saying, this is an election which has got a long way to go yet. I think the final month is going to be really interesting, and I think we'll probably see the gloves come off a little bit more than we've seen up to date.